So today I'm going to walk everybody through Azure Data Catalog. Azure Data Catalog has a little bit of history at Microsoft. There was a tool that was out there that was really kind of an interesting piece. It was called Project Barcelona was the code name. And the promise of Project Barcelona was really to fill kind of a hole that Microsoft has from a data platform perspective. And that's in the area of collecting metadata. And if you look at some of the different Gartner reports that are out there, you'll see that as kind of a consistent theme, especially in the areas of BI, where you just don't have a great way to expose, or didn't until now, didn't have a great way to expose metadata to the end consumers to kind of share and leverage. And Project Barcelona started to tackle that, but it really took a stroll more on auditing and lineage and ETL packages and how data moved. Azure Data Catalog is a little bit different. Azure Data Catalog is really about exposing the metadata about what data assets exist in your organization, and then using really more of a crowdsourced kind of model to let individuals come in and annotate information and give it more descriptions, let people explore, let people search, and then eventually on the one end consume it. So what we're going to walk through today, and this might be there's not a ton to go through, but we'll see how long it takes. We're going to talk about publishing today. So we'll look at how do you set the catalog up, what are your options to actually publish metadata. When I publish metadata, what are the kinds of things that I can publish? Once we've published some data, we're going to take a look at annotating that data, so adding some contextual information to it. We'll look at discovering it, so how do I search and come across it, and then we'll talk about consumption. I've got one little added piece at the very end here around extending, and so I'll talk a little bit about just more, these are like Dave's ideas of where this stuff could go and how you could extend that model. All right, so first things first, let's take a look at publishing, or the setup. I'll take it back, set it up first. So the setup. If you want to set up Azure Data Catalog, you can go to azuredatacatalog.com, and we're going to do that in a second, and we're going to create our catalog. Right now, you get to create one catalog per organization. So if you've got a yourorganization.com, you get one catalog. Now, there's, I think, the reasoning behind that, if I were going to try to logically argue why you'd only get one catalog, is that if I'm going to maintain my corporate data assets in one place, then I would only want to be limited to that. I wouldn't want them spread all over into 15 different catalogs. You know, well, which catalog am I supposed to find sales stuff in? And which catalog am I supposed to find finance stuff in? I wouldn't want to look all over the place. However, I understand that this is also kind of makes designing it sometimes a little difficult because you can't maybe logically separate things that should be separated. So it's there. I will say, and I can't speak for sure if Microsoft's going to change this in the future, their APIs have a notion of which catalog you're talking to. So I'm hoping that maybe down the road, be able to add more than one. When you create a catalog, you've got basically two editions that you can do. Free. So you have an unlimited number of users, and you can upload 5,000 data assets. So realistically, with the free edition, for a lot of things, if you have a data warehouse, some analysis services cubes, some SSRS reports, for most organizations, you could probably get away with staying under 5,000 data assets. In the standard edition, you've got unlimited users, 100,000 data assets. And the nice thing, there's two really big things that are in the standard edition. One is your Azure Active Directory access, so you're tied in a little better with security. But the bigger one to me is this notion of a glossary, which we'll talk about when we're annotating data. So they didn't leave that feature, the glossary feature, only in standard edition. And again, standard edition, $1 per user per month. So you can see there both options available. And we're going to take a look at, we're going to use the standard one just so I can show you the glossary stuff. So let's go ahead. Let me grab a window. And I'm going to go to AzureDataCatalog.com. And I'm going to sign into one of my Azure accounts. Give it a minute. And right now it brings me to the default page and says you don't have a catalog. All right. Sure enough, I don't. Demo catalog. You can put a space in there. Nope, no spaces. Demo catalog, and East US is fine. I'm going to use the standard edition. I've put my subscription in there. Not going to do anything with security groups yet. Catalog users, just myself. For now, I can add administrators to it. I can add catalog administrators, so on and so forth. Since I'm the only person, I don't have to worry about much of that. So I'll just go ahead and create a catalog. It doesn't take terribly long. While it's running, I'm going to actually log into the Azure portal just so you can see that this actually does exist kind of in both places. You can't create it from the portal. You have to create it from AzureDataCatalog.com. But once it's there, it'll show up. So now I've got my demo data catalog is there, and on the other side, it's ready. All right, so that's it. That's all it really takes to set up a data catalog. If you want to mess with this and try it for free, you can go out to Azure Data Catalog, set up the free one, really pretty straightforward. All right, so the second piece then, once we've set it up, we want to look at publishing. So the idea here is we're going to look at some data asset. Those data assets can be SSRS reports, they can be SQL Server tables, views, stored procedures, it can be stuff out of Hadoop. When we get in there, you'll see kind of the array of options that are available, and you can go to the documentation there for the supported sources. It's a pretty long list. There's three ways for us to then go reach into those elements and bring back their metadata. By talking about a table, what columns do I have, what's their data types, and so on. We can do it manually through the web portal. So where I was just at, I can just go in, manually type one in, one at a time. I don't want to do that, but I can. The second one, which we're going to use here, is the Click One application. So we're going to launch that application here in a second. We're going to point it to my local SQL Server. We're going to pick a couple of things and we're going to publish them. And then the last one is the API. So the Azure Data Catalog has a REST API that you can use to actually publish items to. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about extending here in a second. So let's go ahead and add some items. So I'm going to launch the app. Let that go for a second. Just to show you what we're going to go after, I was very proud today. In Management Studio, I've opened up my local SQL Server, and I'm going to use the worldwide importers. Now that they're officially deprecating AdventureWorks, I can move on to a new database, and people can later complain about using worldwide importers for every single demo. But it's a pretty typical old TP system. We're going to focus on the sales area, so we'll look at things like customers, invoice lines, invoices, order lines, orders. We're going to pull that stuff in. Those are the things that we want to expose in the data catalog. So let's go back here, run the application. It's thinking. All right, so first thing the application is going to ask me to do is sign in. So I'll put in my Azure credentials. I've been writing PowerShell scripts today in Azure, and I've had to enter my credentials about 9,000 times every time I run the script and test it. Putting in my credentials. Maybe later if somebody knows how to get around having to do that every single time, they can let me know. All right, so I'm going to put my credentials in for the catalog and sign me in. And as soon as it signs in, it shows me the list of available sources that are through the application. That doesn't mean this is all the sources that are possible. You can grab data from other sources that aren't listed here. They just aren't in this UI yet. Those are back in the supporting documentation of all the sources that are available. You can also, again, remember that you can go in and basically put stuff into the other bucket. So if you want to put something out there that says, you know, so-and-so has a little database over wherever, you can go put that stuff into the catalog. And just to browse through these, so the big ones that hopefully everybody here would care about, SQL Server, SQL Data Warehouse, Analysis Services, Reporting Services. I do want to try the Oracle one. I have a client that we're going to try that out hopefully pretty soon. Master Data Services, Azure Document DB, DB2. So a lot of the major players are already here and available in the UI. I'm going to pick just SQL Server. Again, we're going to go against my local host. So next, local host, SQL 2016. Windows is fine, fine. Connect. All right, as soon as I hit that, it brings me back all the databases that are on my server. So I wanted worldwide imports, I wanted sales, and I think we wanted invoice lines, orders, customers, categories. That'll give us a chunk. Whoops, I brought them all over. Well, whatever, we'll bring them all over. So we'll bring everything from sales. A couple of things on the objects that we're going to register. One, there's this include preview. It basically does kind of exactly what you would think that is. It's going to go and actually query your data and pull a chunk of that data into the Azure Data Catalog so people can view it. If you're concerned about people seeing actual data versus just the table metadata, I'd leave this unchecked. In my mind, if you do a good job annotating your data, you probably don't need to bring a preview over. So I'm going to leave it. I don't want to do the preview for now. I do, however, want to do a data profile, which is pretty nice. The data profile is going to tell me things like what's the min value, max value, how many rows are there. It's just going to give me a little bit of information about what kind of things are in there. And then I can add an expert. So since I'm the only one in there, I'll put myself. And any tags. So we're going to put this under sales. And if I wanted to keep going, I could say, well, we won't put orders because it's not all orders. So I'm going to leave this one just at sales because everything I'm publishing right now is sales. So let's go ahead and register it. And it's running a series of queries. And if you fire up a profiler trace, you'll see that it's running tables against, you know, sys tables, sys columns, and I have some of those I can share if people want to see what happens in a trace. But in the trace, it's basically querying that metadata and then publishing that metadata up to the data catalog. And we're almost there. 84, 88. Well, there it goes. Now it's speedy. All right, everything's registered. And we can go back in now, view it in the portal. When I hit view in the portal, one of the things you might notice is the URL put in a bunch of these things search terms. And basically in the search terms, it narrowed down to the stuff that I just registered, so as of today. So this is, if we had more data in our data catalog, it wouldn't show us, it would only be showing us what I just published. And we can remove the filters and see everything. But, so we have our database out there. So we can go into the database, we can look around what's in the database, we can look at our tables. Now we're really getting into this piece about annotating it. So let's jump back to the presentation for a second. So annotating. Once we've registered those data assets, we basically can go in there and start describing them. And there's 5 things that we can add to those. One, or two really, that we did when we set it up. We added an expert. So I put myself in as the expert. That's just the person that would be the go-to person for that data. We have tags. They're exactly what they sound like, just a tag. So if I want to say this is sales, if I want to say this is a procedure, whatever it is, I can add those text tags to it. The glossary is a piece we'll look at. That's the element that's available in the standard edition. So the glossary lets me define terms and then attach them to objects, pretty much like tags. But once I define them in the glossary, it gives me a better reference point to go into an asset, look at a tag, click on what's the glossary definition, and it'll take me over to the glossary. The description, just what it sounds like, it's a description of the asset, and then documentation. So let's take a look at what those kind of are in the portal. We'll focus on orders, that's fine. So when we're in orders, I can come in here and friendly name, orders is pretty friendly, no need to add that on. Description, all sales orders. We can put them through. I've already added a tag for sales. Why don't I go add another one for orders? So if somebody wants to look up orders, they can do that. So I add the order tag, gives me the connection info, where is this thing located, and then if I want to manage this object, I can take ownership of it. So those are the descriptors. The other things that are in here, no preview because I didn't load preview data. The columns, so on any of the columns I can do that. So maybe I want to go in here and say, order ID, well that's my primary key. Some people won't care, users probably don't care, but that'll be there. We could add something here like this, salesperson ID, person that actually made the sale, right? And we just continue to annotate the data, add information to it. Then we have the data profile I talked about. So this will tell me things like how many rows, what's in each of the columns, as I had mentioned, min, max, average, so on. This is kind of useful information from a query perspective, just to know, hey, I'm going after something and it's got 73,000 or 73,000 null values, and the table itself has 73,595 rows, so everything's null. You can see that, just an interesting, I like the data profile, I think it's a good thing to bring over. If you want to update the data profile, you just have to republish the assets. So once you republish the asset, it'll republish the data profile, it'll leave the stuff you had there before, and just give it any updates that it needs. And then the last piece here is the documentation. And this is literally, Word style documentation, pretty stuff. If you had somebody who's going to write, maybe you had a spec that says this is what the orders table is supposed to be like, you could throw that content in here into the documentation and write whatever you need to write as far as that goes. So really pretty simple, pretty easy, but I think interesting stuff. Let's go ahead on our order lines. I'm going to find order lines. Or I just type order lines, but I found it. Let's go to order lines, and we'll go to its properties, and let's also add that tag orders. So now we've got orders, and if we go back to our search now and we say orders, now you can see it springs back my orders table, and theoretically should have brought back my other one. Maybe I didn't hit the tag, but nonetheless we can use the tags to go in and search that stuff. Let's go add a glossary term this time. So when I add a glossary term, so let's add one for invoices. And it doesn't have, well, we could do one. Let's do sales, because this gets people confused. Sale of our product. You'd be surprised how many companies you go into and you ask to define sales and you get 15 different answers. So let's create the sales one, and then let's also create one called invoices. And we'll put its parent as sales. And so the invoice is what did we bill the customer versus an order, which is what's the order we're trying to fulfill. And we'll create invoices. So now we've got a couple of glossary terms out there, invoices and sales. And if I go back, let's go back into my catalog. I really just want orders, but I want to get back out here. Let's go to this. back to catalog. Explore the database. I like it this way. And let's pull this to the side a little. So let's find invoices. This time we're going to add another tag. And this, when I type invoices, start to type invoices, it gives me the suggestion to grab that glossary term. So now it's got a slightly different icon, but if somebody's in here looking at this asset and they say, oh, well, what does this mean? Now I can go open the glossary, it'll go to invoices, and it'll say, ah, this is what we bill to a customer. So they can kind of move through that and get a little bigger description than just a simple tag. So realistically, your glossary items have more definition than your tags. All right, so that's annotating our information. Once you're done annotating the information, then you can look at consuming it. And I actually didn't put it on here, but there's one more tool in here that's not listed. Power Query for Excel is in there. But basically, once you've annotated the data, you've put it into the catalog, now you can use different Microsoft tools to go and look at that information. And so we'll use ours. We'll go into Excel, and we'll look at it with Excel just to see what we get back. So if I go back into my catalog, and let's go back. Let's just go back to the whole database. I don't want this window to keep going away. And why don't we pick on, let's go to invoices. Invoices, and now we want to see here, I'm going to say open in Excel. When I say open in Excel, it basically gives me an ODC file, and if you're not familiar with the ODC files, it's an Office data connection. If I was in Excel and I said create new connection, it'll create an ODC file. So now I've got this ODC file, and if I click on the ODC file and move Excel into my other window, and you didn't see it because it's on my other screen, but it asked me to enable that, and so I did. And if I say in here, let's just do a table for now. So we'll say table. It's running my query. And there we go. It brought all that data that I was just working with, or that exists in that invoice table, it brings it back into Excel. So the idea being the end users, now this table, maybe not the best thing you want to expose to your end users. Maybe it's a view, right? Some invoices view, this data set that you've created. They say this is a good one for you to consume. The idea being they can come and search for it because they said, I need to get some data about invoices. They can search for it. They can come and grab it in the catalog, and then they can go and open it here. I opened it in Excel. If they wanted to kind of do the same thing, open it in Power BI Desktop, because I have it, SQL Server Data Tools, or Power Query if they happen to be using Power Query in Excel. So those options are there, and the data that I brought over, it's all the data that was sitting out in that table. I wouldn't say you got to watch someday, somebody's going to go, maybe you want to limit, be hard to limit what they could do, but give them a little bit of training to not just dump it into Excel if it's some monumental table. Maybe go get the first 1,000, or better yet, if you're going to really analyze it, you want to put that into something like Power BI Desktop and pull that through. So, pretty interesting. Grab the data, can pull it back, no problem. All right, so we went through registering it, annotating it, consuming it, and then the last little piece here that I wanted to talk about was just extending that. So Azure Data Catalog does have a REST API. I've started to look at it. I haven't had a ton of time to play with it, but effectively it's a pretty bare bones UI or API, I should say, but it does the things that you need it to do. You can publish data to it, you can annotate data, you can return data. You have to know some .NET because it's a REST API. There's some samples out there that'll help you get started. What I think is interesting, and this gets into the Dave opinion portion of this, I think this is an interesting one from a metadata-driven ETL perspective. We've been doing a lot of work lately where we go in and we query metadata, which we've had to write the queries ourselves and pull that stuff together. This would allow us to basically point Azure Data Catalog at a SQL Server, at an Oracle database, whatever we want to get data out of, pull it through, annotate it, and then pull that metadata back out to generate our ETL. And we've done this again with our own handwritten stuff, and we're kind of toying with the notion of how do we do this with Azure Data Catalog. What would be nice about it is you'd have one, ETL that we could drive off of the metadata, but two, you'd have that data catalog sitting out there, so whatever it is you're moving around, people can go to the data catalog and see it. Last little bit of 2 cents pieces that I hope someday make it into this tool that you won't see yet. There is SQL Server, there is reporting services, there is analysis services. One thing that's not in here and I think is kind of important is potentially integration services, or maybe Azure Data Factory. It's nice to know, and what's hard about that is those aren't really data assets that you can consume, but knowing that they exist and knowing that they're out there, I think is an important part of what's going on. And that's something just personally would like to see. The other one is doing name value pairs in the annotation. It's nice that you can go in and add tags, but it would be kind of interesting if you could go in there and do name value pairs too. So anyways, that's the last little bit of my 2 cents. All right, so that's it. Azure Data Catalog, it really is pretty straightforward. You're going to set it up. You can go to azuredatacatalog.com to set it up. The publishing is very straightforward. You can do it manually through the portal. You can do the one-click install application, or you can use the API. When you're annotating it, you're adding tags, descriptions, documentations, so not like you have to learn an array of things that have to be put on an annotation, and then you can consume it with some of the big Microsoft data consumption tools. All right, that's what I have for a presentation. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take those now.
Yeah, Dave, thanks for that. Jody, we've just got 2 questions. One, do we have Power BI as a source in the data catalog?
That one, I haven't tried it. Let me go look. That would be an interesting one, because it's got all this data underneath. All right, 900 times to sign in into Azure. Oh, wrong one. I didn't see it the other day, but these things, like everything Azure changed. I don't see it, and I'd have to check that list of sites to see if it's one. I don't recall it being there, but maybe that's something they'll look at in the future.
All right, and the second one that we have here, Dave, is there a place for data model diagram to put in relationship between tables?
No. Yeah, nothing in there that says these are how these two things fit together.
Okay.
Or that they're related.
All right, and then another one here is, what kinds of security have you worked with for securing sections of the catalog, or are you enforcing security at the source instead?
Well, we're definitely enforcing security at the source. I mean, absolutely doing that. And in all honesty, we haven't been doing anything with the security on the catalog. I mean, pretty much we're working on, right now with the people that we have doing this stuff, we're trying to drive adoption. So we're just publishing and saying, here's what's available, come help us annotate that. And then we do all that, the back-end security to say, if you can't get to something, you can't get to it. So we're not so worried. At this point, we're not worried about letting them know that it does exist. but we still want to have security on the back end so that they can't get at things they're not supposed to.
Cool. And that is the last of the questions. So with that, we will wrap things up here today. Oh, wait, one more.
One more.
Yep, when you opened Excel, was that your local Excel or was it Excel in the cloud?
That was local Excel.
All right.
Yep.
All right, well, thanks, Dave, for presenting here today, and thank you, everyone, for attending. With this, I'm going to close out today's session.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy Power Summit. See you all there.
All right, thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Good.
Bye.
Bye.